Hello and welcome to my GCSE Maths Higher Paper 1 predicted paper for AQA for this summer. Before we begin, some general information. Firstly, I'd highly recommend that you download and try doing this paper before watching the walkthrough. I've put a link in the description so you can download it to try first. The paper perfectly covers the advanced topic list material released by AQA in February 2022. All of the questions are original and created by myself, so you won't find these questions in any other paper. And finally, there's no guarantee that questions will be asked exactly in this way, but this is excellent practice for your summer exams. This paper is non-calculator, remember, and I will be recording more walkthrough videos to other papers, so subscribe so you don't miss out on those uploads. So we begin with the multiple choice questions. For this question, we need to circle the value that's closest to 3.019. First of all, we'll write that number down. Then underneath, we'll write all of the other numbers. This makes them easier to compare. Some of these numbers have different amounts of decimal places, so we'll put some extra zeros in for comparison. If you now look down the tenths column, we can rule out two numbers straight away. These two numbers here, because they have a 2 and a 1 rather than a 0, are quite far away from the number. So we're left with 3.010 and 3.025. If we subtract them away from our original number, we can see how far away they are. So 3.019 take away 3.010 gives 0.009, and if we do the same with the other one, 3.025 take away 3.019, we get 0.006. Since this gives a smaller number, it must be closer. So the answer to the question is 3.025. For this question, we need to write 1.4 centilitres as a fraction of 80 millilitres. The first thing that I notice with this question is that these two have different units, so we need to convert one of them. You should know that 1 centilitre is 10 millilitres. So if we take the 1.4 centilitres, we've times there by 1.4, so we times the 10 by 1.4, and we end up with 14 millilitres. So 1.4 centilitres is the same as 14 millilitres. So our fraction is just 14 over 80. Which we can simplify by dividing by 2 on top and bottom to get 7 over 40, and that's the answer to the question. For this question, we need to decide which of the transformations gives an image that's not congruent to the original shape. The word congruent just means identical after the transformation. So if we look at a rotation first of all, when you rotate a shape, the resulting shape is still the same shape, it's just been turned around. If we look at a reflection, the resulting shape is still the same shape, it's just been flipped over. A translation, that's still the same shape because it's moved, but an enlargement isn't because the shape changes in size, so those are not congruent, in which case the answer is enlargement. For this question, we need to do some simplification. So if we write the question out again, looking at the operations, we've got a multiplication here in the middle. Order of operations says we need to do that before we add or subtract, so we'll deal with that bit first. So if we write 3b down, and then 2b times b gives 2b squared, and then we've got minus b squared on the end. We can now collect like terms. We've got 2b squared take away b squared, so we'll write the 3b as it was, and then 2b squared take away b squared is just 1b squared, or b squared, in which case that's the answer. In this question, we have Dan and Liz who are both painting fence panels. Dan can paint 4 panels every 2 hours, and Liz can paint 1 panel every 15 minutes. To make them easier to compare, we're going to work out how many they can each paint in 1 hour. So if Dan does 4 panels every 2 hours, to get from 2 hours to 1 hour, you just half it. So Dan must do 2 every hour. For Liz, it's 1 panel every 15 minutes. To get from 15 minutes to 1 hour, you times by 4. So Liz must do 4 every hour. Working together though, they would do 2 plus 4, so 6 per hour. The question said how long will it take them to paint 21 fence panels? So all we're going to do here is 21 divided by 6, which gives 3.5. So the answer to the question is 3.5 hours. Some people might prefer to write this down in a different way. If we say 1 hour they would paint 6 panels, then 2 hours it would be another 6 panels, so 12. 3 hours will be another 6 panels, so 18. And then you only need 3 more panels, and that must be done in half an hour since they do 6 an hour, so you get 3.5 hours. For this question, we're going to deal with the bracket squared first. When you square anything, you just times it by itself, so we need to do 2/3 times 2/3. To times these together, you multiply numerators, so 2 times 2 gives you 4, and then 3 times 3 gives you 9. So this is the same as 4/9. So the question is just 4/9 plus a quarter. To do this, we look for a common denominator. The lowest common multiple of 9 and 4 is 36, so we'll write that on the bottom of both fractions. We then convert 4/9 to something over 36. 9 times 4 gives 36, so we times 4 on the top. 4 times 4 is 16. For 1/4, we times by 9, so it's 1 times 9, 9. We can then add the numerators together. 16 add 9 is 25, so we get 25 over 36. Question 6b is an index law question, so we're going to deal with the last part of this question first. We'll leave 2 to the 20 as it is. The last part is the bracket to a power law. When we have a bracket to a power, we just multiply the powers. So this is 3 times 4, 12, so it's 2 to the 12. We've then got the division law. The division law says you subtract the indices, so we're going to do 20 take away 12, which is 8. So the answer to the question is 2 to the 8. For this question, we need to write this number in standard form. The first part of standard form is always a number from 1 to 10, so we're going to need 4.2 for this question. Then we'll times it by a power of 10. You should recognise that this number is a small number, so the power of 10 would be negative. So if we start with 4.2 and consider how many times that decimal place needs to move, it would be 1, 2, 3 times, and then we'll get our number. So the power will be -3. This is a standard form calculation question. To do this, we'll multiply the numbers 4 and 3 first. 4 times 3 gives 12. We'll then look at the powers of 10, 10 to the 3 times 10 to the 5. When you times things with the same base, you add the indices. So if we add 3 and 5, we get 8. So this is the same as 10 to the 8. Now this number isn't in standard form, but the question said give your answer in standard form. The reason it isn't is because the 12 at the front is greater than 10. Remember, the first part needs to be between 1 and 10. So if we change the 12 to a 1.2 by dividing it by 10, we'll need to also multiply the 10 to the 8 by 10 to keep things balanced. 10 to the 8 times 10 is 10 to the 9. And that's the answer to the question. For this question, we need to solve an equation. We're going to deal with this plus 9 here first. To do that, you subtract 9 from both sides. If we subtract it from the left, then it cancels out, so we're left with x over 4. If we subtract it from the right, 3 take 9 gives -6. The next thing to deal with is this divide 4 on the bottom. The inverse of dividing 4 is multiply 4, so we multiply 4 on both sides. On the left, we'd end up with x, and on the right, -6 times 4 is -24. And that's the answer to the question. For this question, we need to simplify a ratio. But the numbers in the question have different units, one is in pounds and one is in pence. So we convert the £3.60 into 360 pence. So it's 360 to 80. We can simplify this ratio by dividing by 40 on both sides. Dividing 40 on the left gives 9, dividing 40 on the right gives 2. And that's your answer. For this question, you'll need a pair of compasses and a ruler. We have 2 bits of information to help us find the region R. We're going to actually start with the second bit, the bit where it says we're closer to point C than to point D. If you're closer to point C than point D, you need to construct the perpendicular bisector of line CD. To do this, place your compass point at C. Draw yourself an arc which is over half of the length of the line, something like this. Then without changing your compass size, place the point at D and draw another arc, something like this. If you then connect up the intersection points with a straight line, you'll get something like this. We can now see the region above the line that's closer to C than it is to D. Remember, don't rub out your construction lines. We can now look at the other part of information, which says we're less than 5.5 centimeters from E. To do this, set your compasses to 5.5 centimeters, then place your compass point at E and draw yourself an arc, something like this. So if we're within this arc, but also above the red line, we must be in this region R here, which you could shade in. For this question, we need to find the area of a sector. To do this, we're going to imagine first of all that it's not a sector, it's a whole circle. We'll use the formula for the area of a circle, which is pi r squared. The radius of this sector is 6, so it would be pi times 6 squared. 6 squared is 36, so that's 36 pi. Remember, in this question it said they want the answer in terms of pi, and we don't have a calculator. Now it's not a whole circle, it's actually 3/4 of a circle, so we need to find 3/4 of 36 pi. To do this, we divide it by 4, which gets 9 pi, and then times it by 3. So 9 pi times 3 gives 27 pi. And that's the answer to the question. For this question, we need to use the graph to calculate how many bacteria were in the sample after 5 hours. To do this, go to 5 hours on the x-axis and draw up until you hit the graph. Once you hit the graph, draw horizontally until you hit the other axis. We then need to read off this value. Now it's between 2 and 3, but the axis says they're in thousands, so it's actually between 2,000 and 3,000. Each big square represents 1,000, and it's split into 5 smaller squares, so the smaller squares are 200. So this is actually 2,800. What type of graph is shown here? Well, I'll show you all 4 types of graphs. An exponential graph looks like this, a reciprocal graph looks like this, a cubic graph like this, and a quadratic graph like this. So this one matches an exponential graph. For this Venn diagrams question, we'll first of all look at where it says 3/8 of students had brothers and sisters. Now there were 200 students overall, so we just need to find 3/8 of 200. To do this, take 200 and divide it by 8, which gives 25, and then take that 25 and times by 3, which gets 75. So there were 75 students that had brothers and sisters. This represents the middle part of the Venn diagram, the intersection, so we'll write 75 in there. We can then look at where it says, in total, 105 students had sisters. The circle representing sisters is marked here in green, so this circle must add up to 105. Now there's already a 75 in there, so if we do 105 take 75, we get 30, so this missing part must be 30. We can now look at this last bit of information. The number of students with brothers was 15 less than the number who had sisters. We know the number who had sisters was 105, so if we do 105 take 15, we get 90. This means the blue circle for brothers must add up to 90. Again, there's already a 75 in there though, so we do 90 take 75, which gets you 15. So this missing part is 15. Now it looks like we finished, but there's one more piece of information, the number of people that didn't have brothers or sisters. To do this, we add up all the numbers we've got so far, so 15, 75 and 30, which gets you 120. Since there were 200 students in the whole Venn diagram, we do 200, take 120, which leaves you with 80. So we write an 80 in the bottom corner here. And that's the question finished. For this question, we need to factorise, which means to put into brackets. We have a quadratic here, so we're going to need 2 brackets. Notice the 36 at the end is a square number. This is an indicator we need to do the difference of 2 squares. The square root of 36 is 6, so this would factorise to x plus 6 and x minus 6. For the next part we need to simplify, but factorising will help us do that. Notice that x squared minus 36 on the bottom was in the previous part, so we've already factorised the bottom. To factorise the top, we're going to look at this 42 at the end here, and because it's positive, it means the brackets must either be plus plus or minus minus, but since it's a negative 19x, they'll both be minus. It's quite common for these questions that one of the brackets from the bottom will also be on the top, so that they cancel out. So an x minus 6 actually appears on the top. To work out the other bracket, we need to consider what we multiply negative 6 by to get positive 42, which would be negative 7. And it should be a 2x because we need to get 2x squared, so it's 2x minus 7. We can then cancel out these 2 brackets here, which leaves us the other 2 as our answer, so it's 2x minus 7 over x plus 6. For this identity question, we'll expand the brackets first, so 6 times ax is 6ax. 6 times 4 is 24, and there's also a plus 10 at the end. We can just write the right hand side as it is. The left hand side could be simplified a little bit, plus 24 and plus 10, so we've got 6ax plus 34. And again write the right hand side the same. We can now equate coefficients. Because this is an identity, we must have the same thing on the left as we do on the right. So if you look at the terms in x first, 6ax and 3x, there must be the same amount of x's on both sides, so 6a must be equal to 3. Looking at the constant terms then, 34 must equal negative 2b. We can then solve both of these equations. To solve the left equation, divide by 6 on both sides, which gives you a equals 0.5 or a half, and on the right one divide by -2, which gives b equals -17. For this question, the first thing to notice is that because we have 5 centimeters at the top here, and it's 10 centimeters along the bottom, this line here must be 5 centimeters as well, since 5 add 5 gives 10. The 5 centimeters on the right, I'm going just to write inside the shape because it will get covered up in a moment. The next thing to do is actually imagine this shape as a 3D shape. So if we extend these lines into 3D and then complete the shape, we end up with this prism here, which has a length 5 centimeters. We're now looking for squares. There are actually 3 of these, marked here. You can tell they're squares because the shape has a length of 5 centimeters, remember, so it's 5 by 5. So there are 3 squares. The remaining faces are not squares, we just need to count them up. 2 of them are quite easy, you can see this face here, and also the very front face here. That compound shape on the front is also there on the back, we just can't see it. There's also a face on the bottom underneath here that's a rectangle, and another rectangle from the side here. So altogether, there are 5 faces that are not squares. For this question, it says to get from A to B, we increase by 10%. So to get from A to B, we multiply by 1.1. It then says to get from B to C, we increase by 20%. So to get from B to C, we multiply by 1.2. We need to work out how to get from A to C in one go, which is times by 1.1 and then times by 1.2. So we just need to do 1.1 times 1.2. Now 11 times 12 is 132, so 1.1 times 1.2 is 1.32, which is the answer to our question. For this question, we need to try and find out which equation represents a straight line. Straight line graphs can always be written in the form y equals mx plus c. The answer turns out to be this one. If we write x plus y equals 3 squared is just 9, so it's x plus y equals 9. If we then subtract x from both sides, we get y equals minus x plus 9, which is in the correct form. For this question, we need to find a region bounded by these inequalities. We'll start with x is greater than 2. To do this, we'll draw the line of x equals 2, but we're going to draw it as a dotted line since the symbol was greater than rather than greater than or equal to. So draw a dotted line for x equals 2. Now we want everything to the right hand side of this line since that's greater than 2, but we always shade out the part we don't want, so we'll shade out left of the line like this. We then move on to y is greater than 1. So we draw the line y equals 1, again it's a dotted line, and we want everything above the line, so we'll shade out everything below the line. The final line, x plus y is less than or equal to 8, is a bit harder. Imagine it said x plus y equals 8, and we can plot this using the cover-up method. If x were 0, we could cover that up, and we get y is 8. So we know this crosses at y equals 8 on the y-axis. If we cover up y and imagine y was 0, we get x is 8, so it crosses at 8 on the x-axis. We can then join these 2 points up with a straight line, and this time it's a solid line, since it said less than or equal to, like this. It says everything below the line because it's less than, so we shade out above the line. And we're left with the region we want, so we label that R. For this question, we have a recurring decimal we need to turn into a fraction. To start this, write x equals 0.47 recurring. We then multiply by 10 to get 10x, which is 4.7 recurring. Now at this point, some people may take away, but I prefer to go again because all of the numbers after the decimal point haven't quite lined up. You'll see most of them do, but there's a 7 and 4 here, which don't match. So I'd times by 10 again to get 100x, which is 47.7 recurring. You can now see from the top 2 of these, all of the numbers after the point match. So I would do 100x take away 10x. 100x take away 10x is 90x. We then write an equal sign. 47 take away 4 gives 43, and then all of the other numbers will give 0.0. So we have 90x equals 43, we divide both sides by 90, divide the left, gives you x, divide the right, gives you 43 over 90. And this one doesn't simplify, so it's 43 over 90. To start this question, I'm going to work out how you get from the first to the fourth term in one big jump. To do this, you just take away the terms, so 15a minus 5b, take away 3a plus b, which is 15a minus 5b, take away 3a, and importantly, take away b, because that negative affects the b as well. If we collect like terms, we have 15a take 3a, which is 12a, and minus 5b minus b is minus 6b. This tells us to get from the first to the fourth term, we do 12a minus 6b. But in reality, we wouldn't do this in one big jump. There's actually 1, 2, 3 jumps to get from the first to the fourth term. So if we take that 12a minus 6b and divide it by 3, we find out how much we get for moving between each term. So 12a divided 3 is 4a, and minus 6b divided by 3 is minus 2b. So the difference between each term is 4a minus 2b. We've been asked for the fifth term, which comes after the fourth term, so we're already on 15a minus 5b, so we need to do another 4a, take away 2b. 15a, add 4a, is 19a, and minus 5b minus another 2b is minus 7b. So the answer is 19a minus 7b. For this question, we're going to write down everything we know about speed, distance, and time for each part of the journey. We'll start with A to B. From A to B, we're told that it's 30 miles an hour, so the speed is 30 miles an hour. We're told the distance is 20 miles, but we're not told the time. For B to C, we're told the speed is 50 miles an hour, we're told the distance is 40 miles, again we're not told the time. So we need to work out the time for each part here. The formula for time is distance divided by speed. So if we work out the time for the red part first, A to B, then time is distance, which is 20, divided by speed, which is 30, which is 2/3. And 2/3 of 1 hour is 40 minutes. If we do the blue section, distance is 40, speed is 50, so it's 4/5, and 4/5 of 1 hour is 48 minutes. So from A to B took 40 minutes, and B to C took 48 minutes. If you add those together, you get 88 minutes. For this question, we need to make A the subject, which means write it in the form A equals. So here's our formula. The first thing I'm going to do is eliminate this plus square root n here. To do that, I'll just subtract it from both sides. If I subtract it from the left, it's t minus root n. If I subtract it from the right, it's 4 over a. Since I want a as the subject and it's currently on the bottom of this fraction here, I'll times by a next. Times by a on the left, and you get a, and then a bracket t minus root n, times by a on the right, and this a disappears, so it's just 4. We're almost there. To isolate this a, we'll divide both sides by the whole bracket t minus root n. If we do that on the left, we've just got a, and if we do it on the right, it's 4 over t minus root n. For this question, we're going to draw a cumulative frequency graph. To do this, we need to do the cumulative frequency column in the table. The first frequency is 20, and then we add on each next frequency. So 20 add 32 is 52. 52 add 18 is 70, 70 add 10 is 80. We then need to plot these. You must be careful though and plot the end point of each interval with the cumulative frequency, not the midpoint. So the first point is 10 with 20, which goes here, and then 20 with 52, which goes here, and 30 with 70, which goes here, and 40 with 80, which goes here. We then need to join these up with straight lines, but you should always check the lower point of the first interval. Here it's 0, which means we start at 0, but if it isn't 0, you have to connect to whatever number is marked here. So we'll join up like this. For this question, we want to look at the shoppers who were shopping for less than 25 minutes. The first group is 0 to 10, so we'll include those 20 people. The next group is 10 to 20 minutes, so we want all of those people, that's 32 more. The next group though is 20 to 30. Now if we want less than 25 minutes, that's right in the middle of this group. Since it's an estimate, we'll just take half of those people, so we'll take 9. The last group is from 30 to 40, so we don't want any of those people, because that's definitely more than 25 minutes. If you add up all of these people, there are 61 people. Since it says they spend an average of £5, we'll do 61 times 5, which gets you £305, and that's the answer. We'll start this question by completing the tree diagram. For the first set of traffic lights, green is 2 over 10, which means not green must be 8 over 10, since they add together to make 1. If we do this in a similar way with the second set, we've got 3 over 10, which must go with 7 over 10. This section here must be the same as the one directly below it because they both represent the second set of traffic lights. So it's 3 over 10 and 7 over 10 again. Now on to the next question, we need to know the probability at least one of the traffic lights is green. The first section, they're both green, so this is included because at least one of those is green. The second one is green followed by not green, and there's one green here, so that's included. Moving on to the next one, it's not green and green. Again, there's one green in there, so that's included. And the final section, not green, that one isn't included. So we could work out 3 probabilities here and add them together, but there is a quicker way. We could just work out the bottom probability, the one we don't want, and subtract it from 1. So we'll do the probability of not green. Since that follows this part of the branch, we'll do 8 over 10 times by the next part, which is 7 over 10. Times these together and you get 56 over 100. Remember, this is the part we don't want, so we'll subtract this from 1. So 1 take away 56 over 100 is 44 over 100, which is the answer to the question. You don't need to simplify the answer since it's probability and it hasn't told you to, but this will be the only exception. For this question, we need to do transformations of graphs. You've already been given the graph of sine x, and now we've got sine of 2x. This means we're doing the function f of 2x. One way to think of this is that rather than having a cycle in every 360 degrees, we'll now have a cycle every 180 degrees. Or you may think of it as squashing the graph by scale factor 2. So 0, 0 will stay in the same place, but the point at 91 will now be at 45, 1, halfway. We'll then continue like this so that we get one cycle in 180 rather than 360, and then our second cycle in the next 180. If we join up all of these points with a smooth curve, we get this, which is sine 2x. This next one is 2 sine x, which is like having 2f of x, which means we're going to stretch the graph in the y direction. So currently, the amplitude of the graph is 1, it's now going to be 2. So 0, 0 will stay in the same place, but when 90 was at 1, 90 will now be at 2. 180 will be in the same place, but the 270 that was at -1 will be at -2, and the 360 will be in the same place. So if we join these up with a smooth curve, we get 2 sine of x. We need to write down the vector Pm in terms of a and b. So to get from P to M, I'm going to go from P to S first of all, which is vector A, and then from S to M. Now we have vector B on the left hand side here, and since this is a parallelogram, then S to R is also vector B. So S to M must be half B. So the vector is A plus half B. In this question, we're told that the vectors Pm and xy are parallel. Now we know Pm from the previous question. Pm was A plus half B. Now xy is the same as going from x to q and then q to y. So we'll look at xy in some more detail. In particular, the last bit, qy. We can see from the diagram that the vector ps is A, so the vector qr is also A. And we're told that the point y splits this line into the ratio 2 to 3, which means that qy is 2/5 of this line, so it's 2/5 of A. Now if vectors Pm and xy are parallel, then we can take one of the vectors, say Pm, and times it by a constant k, and we must be able to get the other vector xy. We wrote down what Pm was already, so A plus half B times k, and we also wrote down something for xy. Here, which was xq plus 2a. If we expand the left hand side of this, we get ka plus half kb. We'll leave the right hand side the same. Now if we look at the vector xq, and then look over at the parallelogram, you'll see that this is parallel to vector b, so it must just be some multiple of b, in which case the only two parts of this equation that have a's are ka and 2/5 a, in which case k must be 2/5. If we know that k is 2/5 and then compare the two parts that must have b in them, we see that half times k, which we know is 2/5 now, times b must equal xq. If we do a half times 2/5, we get 2/10, which simplifies to 1/5, so xq is 1/5 b. If we now look at this on the diagram, xq is 1/5 of b, then px must be 4/5 of b, since altogether it makes b. The ratio we were asked for in the question is px to xq, so it's 4/5 to 1/5, which if we times by 5, gives 4 to 1. For this question we need to deal with surds. We'll start with 9 sine 60. You need to know that sine 60 is root 3 over 2, so this is just 9 times root 3 over 2, which is 9 root 3 over 2. If we then look at 5 over root 3, this is one where we need to rationalise the denominator, so times by root 3 over root 3, which gives 5 root 3 over 3. So all we need to do is take away these two results. It's 9 root 3 over 2, take 5 root 3 over 3. To subtract these, I need to make sure I have the same number on the bottom. So I'll times the first one by 3 over 3, which gives us 27 root 3 over 6, and the second one by 2 over 2, which gives 10 root 3 over 6. I can now subtract the numerators. 27 root 3 take 10 root 3 is 17 root 3, and on the bottom is 6, which you could write in the form 17 over 6 root 3, and that matches the question. Thank you for watching this video. I've put some grade boundaries here so you can work out roughly what grade you're likely to get. Of course, we don't know the real grade boundaries until the paper's done. Let me know your grade in the comments. Also, check out what I think you should watch next, and subscribe because I'll be adding more walkthrough videos soon.